Welcome, everyone. This is the December meeting of the BEZ Budget Committee. So why don't we begin? Our first item is SE1. First Selectman's Office, $26,430 additional appropriation supplement to the agency.
Of the town budget. As you know, our budget now is a continuing budget. It doesn't end at the end of any fiscal year. And I think if the biggest problem is, I think if you have the application, we had the third page, which was a printout of October 13th, 2015.
Yep.
If you look at it, like temporary services, we have a $18,000 deficit. You know, it just doesn't make sense because we know we have the money in the 100 accounts, but this goes back to 2007, and money was appropriated long before we started. Money was appropriated each year. Some of it got spent, some may have not gotten spent, and it just accumulates. And so that's what you get. You look at this, and you go down through all the accounts, and they don't make a lot of sense because you have deficits where you shouldn't have, and you have in the code number, you have enough money. But we would like to have it, so we want to get on a fiscal year. Starting next year, we're going to come in with another budget for the coming year, starting July 1st. We want this money to end at that time and go through regular fiscal year the town had. I think it'll be much easier for the budget.
Admit it, you really want to be coming to the Budget Committee hearings in February. You're really looking forward to that.
Yeah, once a year. You know, not that I'm crazy about doing it, but it just makes it cleaner and neater.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, and what we're doing this year is asking, we have not requested any money since September of last year. And so what we're doing is asking for some money to continue us through the rest of this town's fiscal year. And it's, you know, we're a work in progress. Our next budget is probably going to be larger. I don't know yet, but we're a new commission. We have no staff, unfortunately. You know, so right now I'm stuck with doing all the work. We have a little help and secretarial help out of the selectman's office. We may have to come up with some staff of some kind or some consultants to help us here on in. And exactly what we will do next year, I don't know. Now, this money comes out of a special fund. It has about $225,000 in it. This past year, we only took in $41,000, $41,825 exactly. We dropped down $8,725 from the previous year. And that's primarily because our mooring system is not very good. We're having a problem with our harbor master and trying to get things operating correctly. Once we have the harbor management plan finished, the harbor master will then have to comply with the plan. That plan is in draft stage right now. It's gone through 2 public hearings. We've gone back to all the town departments. We're getting a little bit of pushback at this point from the land use agencies. And so hopefully in another month or 2, we'll have the plan done. The Board of Selectmen have to approve it. They've already indicated they don't really have a problem with it. It then has to go to the Connecticut Deep and the Corps of Engineers for approval. Then it has to come back to the RTM for the final approval. But, you know, that's where we are. And we've been working about a year and a half on it now, and it's pretty close. It's in draft form now. And so it'll be finished pretty soon. And then hopefully we can get better regulations. We'll be able to control the harbor a little better.
So, Frank, the RRR fund, which has a balance of $225,000, is that dedicated only to the harbor management area?
That's just for their line
So
item,
that's over
correct.
the years, accumulation of revenues, mooring
Yeah.
fees, whatever.
Like the Shellfish Commission has their own line. It's dedicated strictly for shellfish when they come before you. The 225 is all their money.
Okay. So is the idea, once you get going and get on the regular fiscal cycle for the year, theoretically to get revenues to offset expenses? Or you don't know?
I don't know. They may not. You know, I mean, there's money in there now that we would draw down over the next couple of years, but, you know, unless we derive other sources of revenue, which it says we can create other fees, I'm not sure what those other fees might be at this point. The revenues probably will not come up to what we might have to
And
expend.
so it seems like collection of revenues, or collection of fees is one of the first issues, right?
Right.
In the proper collection.
Yeah.
Accounting for it. Can I ask you just another question? I'll turn over to
Yep.
my colleagues, but so the temporary salary is out of the first selectman's office. So that's a current employee, a current full-time employee that's just dedicating a little bit
Well,
of.
it's a
his
part-time
reserve.
employee. It's a part-time employee who's in the office, and
penny money.
we just transfer this money to the selectman's office and pay for that.
So is she only helping the harbor management, or she helps some other things?
She
does
does the,
both.
she
She
does the
works-
minutes of their meetings. I don't know, she may do some other
She
secretarial
handles
besides
all the mooring fees as they come in and the applications and gets them all in order and passes them on to the harbor master. And then she does a lot of administrative things for me in the office. And she does a lot of things for the selectmen, too. We work back and forth and share the hours.
Okay. Mary Lee?
Frank, going back to your question about, or your point about staff, and you and other volunteers are putting in tremendous amount of time. So I'm trying to envision what kind of staff do you think you might need? Would it be one or two FTEs, or?
I don't
what
know.
that
At this
might look
point,
like?
we have a consultant working with us now on the plan. And probably what would happen is we would continue working with him as on an hourly basis for us. He's a very knowledgeable person in the state in regards to waterfront and regulations, and he has great contacts with the Corps of Engineers, the Connecticut Deep, and everybody. So I envision us at this point just working on with him and on an hourly basis, because you know we're new and we're just sort of trying to find our way right now.
No,
Was it?
no, I have no questions on this.
It's a little, I mean, the hard thing for us, just more to Pete than Frank, in our budget book, there's no disclosure to us. We don't see these RRR accounts, so we have no idea going in of what the anticipated expenses are or what the accumulated funds are. The funds that Frank is talking about actually was a special appropriation last September, I believe, when we allocated the 52,000, I think the figure was. So, I mean, for us to go forward in the way that Frank is describing, we really need to change them over to a mode where we're looking at them in the budget book and are beginning to see what the expected revenues are, because these revenues, his revenues from the mooring fees that have been collected over the last several years, those don't go into the general fund. They've gone to this separate RRR account fund, right? Don't I have this right?
It's a line item in the grant fund. It's not even in the general fund, correct?
Okay, and so as to do what Frank is suggesting, I mean, what your application is today, but in the longer run, to do what Frank is talking about in the longer run, we really need to change the footing in a way so that if he's looking for appropriations, which are going to be running beyond the fees that are expected, that are anticipated or that are collected, then we're really talking about appropriations as part of the annual funding process. I mean, I think what has to happen then is his department has to sort of come into view on our budget process, no longer be one of these RRR accounts, if we're going to do that. I have attended some of the meetings, not all of them, but a handful of the meetings of Frank's commission. And I have an awareness as I listen to it. Again, like Frank, I don't know where it's all going to end up. But there was a process there in their regulations where they were anticipating that people who are making land use applications on water, on properties that abut the water. Matter of fact, there's even some conversation that land use applications on backcountry properties, which in some way affect the quality of water in the harbor, they too should be making an application. And so you had an image as you listened to it that there'll be a process going on at the Harbor Commission, which is not unreminiscent, is that English? Not unreminiscent of what happens in the other land use agencies where I have staff people who are reviewing applications, making proposed changes, teeing these things up for a commission to act on these applications. And just as Katie DeLuca's department is very labor intensive, so too with wetlands, et cetera, even with conservation. You're going to be looking at something the same process over at harbor management, where all these applications, matter of fact, a healthy measure of the land use applications will end up going to yet another agency to be looked at and to have to be processed. And so the staff input on that, if any of that actually took shape, I don't know what shape it will take, that wouldn't be just a one FTE or something. That's a lot of staff.
There's a lot, yeah.
And so I don't see that happening out of I have a little boat down at Greenwich Point. I write my little check for $100 or something. I don't think you're going to cover that expenditure out of these $100 checks from the, I don't know, 800 or 900 people in town who have a boat down there. I don't know how many of you are there. I'm guessing at that figure. But it's going to have to be something where we change the whole footing of this, and this becomes another land use agency and is no longer an RRR account. There's going to have to be, their revenues go to the general fund, and there'll be a table of organization and a budgeting process to cover this, because it's not a small process that's being discussed in your meetings, even from the few that I've attended.
We have statutory authority once the harbor management plan is approved, and that is over all the dock applications. Well, you might say that's nothing. You'd be amazed how many dock applications come in every year in this town. There's a lot of them. And we also have authority to review anything at the coastal zone. Actually, there's a big one tonight coming up down in Barham on a waterfront business zone.
So you're talking about CAM, coastal area management, so?
So, right, so, there are a lot of things that eventually this commission will probably get involved with, and you're right. That's why I'm saying I don't know what the cost will be over the long run, but, it's a work, and we're trying to figure it out.
Well, maybe, a little bit off of Jeff's questions, comments. Within Parks and Rec, are there 1, 2, 3 people dedicated to processing all those slip applications and all that? I mean, who handles all
They don't
that
go to
now?
Parks and Rec. They will only come to the Harbor Management Commission.
No, they will, but
Which
who
is
doesn't?
planning and
who
zoning.
They don't go to
doesn't-
anybody now,
Okay.
actually.
No, it goes to planning and zoning. CAM
Planning and
applications go to
zoning.
planning
No,
and
no, I'm
zoning.
talking
Yeah, but
about both
Oh, okay.
they have no authority over the application itself. And actually, what happens is the Harbor Management Commission is supposed to make a recommendation on any dock application and say yes or no to it, and DEEP is supposed to accept that unless they say there are extraordinary circumstances where they can overturn it.
Understand.
But Mark, your question, I think that's an important question. Who handles these dock applications that you're talking about?
Well, we haven't done anything with them yet because it doesn't work until we have a harbor management plan in place.
And
So
when it does
They
work,
come
what does
in,
it do?
they're being sent to us now. I have a stack that's about that high right now, but there's nothing we can do with them.
In the past, applications that were as to improvements of a number of things that affected the water but were physically above the high water line, that was part of a CAM application, which is at planning and zoning. The things that are below the high water line, such as the dock being put out into the water, which is what Frank was describing, those applications went directly to the DEP in Bridgeport. And there was some dialogue, the exact nature of which I'm not familiar with, back and forth between planning and zoning here in Greenwich and the DEEP people to try and coordinate to a certain extent, but these things have been chaotically divided in this way, which is part of the logic of having, as I understand it, a harbor management plan, so that we can bring a little more of this in-house, as opposed to outhouse, I guess, but in-house. I think that's sort of the scheme here. I may not properly understand it, Frank, but that's sort of how I understood it.
So when do you think the harbor management plan will be completed and approved? By next summer?
Hopefully, late spring, late spring, yeah.
Can I ask you a question, though, about the footing, as Jeff calls it? The Triple R Fund, I mean, I think you do report out when you give us your presentation every year, kind of where some of those stand, but how would the decision be made to take it out of that and either put it into an enterprise fund or the general fund? Who makes that decision, and how would that happen?
Well, first of all, it's covered, the ability to collect fees, mooring fees, and the ability to appropriate money is covered by a budget resolution in the front of the book, just like the Shellfish Commission.
Right.
It's not a dedicated fund. It's easiest to keep it as a line item in a fund such as the grant fund. So that, and another issue is if you created a department, the harbor master is a state employee, he's not a town employee.
Right.
The temporary help is budgeted in the first selectman's budget. However, the $12,000 that's in here as a backup request, which is Penny, is JV'd out of the first selectman's budget. So and the reason you could see in here where you have a shortfall in one area in the major object codes, it stays under budget. The original intent was to hire someone as an independent contractor. They ended up, Penny does a good job collecting, is on the payroll. So she's being coded to the 100ths in the payroll line as opposed to the 149 where you see that large surplus. So right now, the process is that they come to you, in the past they came in June, they asked for X number of dollars, it's appropriated, and it's appropriated from mooring fees which are covered by the budget resolution to collect and put in this line item. Once they're appropriated, it doesn't go to the RTM, and they have the ability to spend. What the issue has come over the past is the contention that existed between the harbor master and the former town administrator as far as authorizing payments for certain expenditures that he felt were not appropriate. For example, commingling time on a cell phone, his submission a request to spend thousands of dollars, and not providing backup to say that X number of minutes has to do with harbor master. Actually, it was a different name back then. It was the Conservation Commission, as opposed to personal use versus town use. But right now, the current budget process is covered by a budget resolution.
Okay. Maybe a related question is for other coastal communities that have a plan in place, how do they staff this? What sort of fund is used to house it? Do we have any information what Stanford or somebody else does?
One thing I will say, the money that comes in from mooring fees must go into a fund that can only be expended for the harbors. And I mean, that's the town ordinance and that's a state statute.
Okay.
So, it's got to be, it has to go to that. It says you can expend other town monies if you want, but those have to be dedicated to that.
As a follow-up for the Monday meeting, I'll look up Stanford to see how they handle the collection of the fees and where it resides and how it's expended, the process.
Thanks.
Okay. All right, let's move on. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
Good luck on finishing up that plan.
Good luck at a lot of things.
All right, next item on the agenda is PW2, Department of Public Works, $165,000 additional appropriation for the William Street Field remediation. Good evening, Amy. How are you?
Hello there, how are you all? All right, let's see if I can do this. I'm trying to get all iPad and electronic like y'all, so. So, see if I can find things on here any better than the
don't look to
piles of
us for
paper on my
assistance.
desk. I don't know what's better. Well, I'm here to, as you noted, ask for those funds to address what was found at the William Street ball field there. High levels of arsenic in a couple of spots kicked that field over into what is called significant environmental hazard, so that had to be reported up to the Connecticut DEEP. That's a regulatory requirement. Once you reach a certain threshold value, you have to report to them, which we did. We've been working on the project. Actually, the Board of Ed, I give a shout out to Ron Matten and company because they took care of doing all that and we're following that along. We were kind of just keeping each other in the loop as to what was going on out there. So that proceeded, and when you're in that kind of situation, you need to tell the Connecticut DEP what is your plan to address the site, what are you going to do. You have to address, at a minimum, the areas of significant environmental hazard. And we looked at it and we said, well, we've got something there that's very similar to what y'all have seen with the Byram Park site, right, where we have the pool, where we've got a location, we've looked at it, we've actually done the work to establish what is a background arsenic level. We've got the plan like we used for a portion of the Greenwich High School site, like we've used for Byram, where you evaluate the area, you evaluate what is background, you say, okay, well, we'll address the little hotspots of significant environmental hazard, but let's go in, address those, address the arsenic levels, take them back to that background level, and put the clean soil on top and put it back in service. So that's what these funds are meant to do. And we have gotten a slight amendment for disclosure here. We've got a letter back from Connecticut DEEP after we put this into you folks that does say, you know, it's one of their standard response letters. It's approving the town's paperwork that's been filed to date. It does say that they want to approve the abatement plan. That would be for the little portions that are the significant environmental hazard. Obviously, really, it's as we call it, a dig and ship job. You're not going to write two different sets of specifications or something for this work, but so they do, because I had in here, we had originally thought we didn't need to get their official approval. So I'll have to amend that a little bit for the RTM, but I wanted you all to know that as well, that now they've given us this letter, there is a little portion that they say what they want to amend, approve, I should say. So we will, what our goal is to get the design all in order, get this thing on the street here, February, March, see if we can get bids in so we could be in there getting it ready for spring, summer. Well, we won't be ready for spring, but ready for at least summer use. So that would be
Does
the
this
goal.
little change from the DEP of Connecticut change your timing?
You know, it shouldn't, but as we've discussed many a time, you know, Leslie's smiling, we've talked a lot about the plans. I can't ever predict the Connecticut DEP. I will be honest, I cannot. This is a straightforward task. This is not like a Greenwich High School project. It's a straightforward, dig up the soils, take them away, put the clean soils back down, put the sod on, you know, put some nice topsoil and some sod or some seed, and away you go. That's what it should be. What Connecticut DEP chooses to do to that process, I can't always predict.
What learning do you have from Byram?
Byram is different. Byram didn't have a significant environmental hazard.
Okay.
So Byram did not have to go through any kind of state review. So that's moving along. I'm told it looks kind of like Mars down there or the moon because they're ripping and tearing, and this favorable weather has been quite good for that. So
Okay, questions?
Just going to Byram again, Amy, their budget was like 1.26, 1.27. I guess the bids came in lower. But I'm just trying to understand the magnitude. Is it fair to say that this is just less volume and in one sense less intense of a collection of arsenic?
it's a lot less volume.
Okay.
It's a lot smaller.
Okay.
And we did look at those
Ladies
bids.
first.
We gave that bid information actually to our, to AECom when they were trying to put together the cost estimate. You know, again, you can never predict, but at least they did have that information to try to judge somewhat what it might cost to do this.
So, a couple of different questions. The first one, Amy, is why, well, I actually have about three questions. Why or what precipitated, you sort of said it, this moving to the DPW from the BOE, which I thought originally the BOE was to do this project. And I know you sort of gave us a little bit at the beginning, but could you elaborate on that? Is this just in order to get it done or be?
Well, I think, you know, without being privy to all the details, you know, I know that Board of Ed staff were proceeding with the work, and then we got some feedback that the Department of Public Works needed to take it up and bring it in here interim. So we're still trying to make sure we're coordinating. For example, Board of Ed staff are still making sure that the fences are up out there. Those are the interim measures that we call them for this, managing the site. They're continuing to verify that those are in place. They have the funding for the actual design of the remedial plan for the site. So we're still working together on this, but it ended up coming back around to Public Works so we could put it in for the budget.
So obviously, any project of this size and scope, $165,000, I would prefer to see within, you know, the capital budget, therefore financeable over 7 years, or 8 years, I guess is how it works out. but this is coming as an interim. However, having had some lessons learned, I guess, all of us, on, you know, in terms of, I'll talk about, you know, MISA, et cetera. This may not operate. I mean, obviously, it's great that you're proceeding and taking the leadership of this, and, you know, I want to make sure that we thank you for that. But what if, you know, for chance it doesn't proceed on schedule, although everyone hopes that it will? Is there a way, or maybe I should be asking Pete, that we cancel this? Because it's my understanding from reading this that in terms of the planning and so forth and so on, there's funds in the BOE, but that we sort of cancel this and come forth with a new capital in the CIP project that would then become available July 1st. So not saying no to the project, but just sort of moving it from taking it out of the fund balance to allowing it to be financed over the basically 8 years by moving it into the CIP. Is there a way to cancel one and move on and move it into the capital if, for some chance, the proposed timeline everyone hopes is kept? Because, you know, obviously we do want this completed ASAP or as soon as possible. But is it possible to approve this, which, you know, I plan to do? I want to make sure that we know that.
Right now, as presented, it's coming from the Z Fund, which means it's going to be interim appropriation funded from the capital non-recurring.
Right.
Your question shouldn't be directed to me, it should be directed to Amy as far as, can you hamper the project as far as delaying it and putting it in the CIP, and then it would be either funded through the mill rate or the bonding program.
Well, you know, again,
Is
I
that
don't
your
mean,
question?
I don't,
Can we
no,
delay
I
this?
don't want
That's the
Amy to
Yeah.
hamper it. I don't want Amy to hamper it. I want Amy to make sure that the project is accelerated as soon as possible. But if for some reason, when we get to the February cycle, we find out that other outside factors are delaying this, is there a way to then have Amy come in to cancel this particular appropriation so that it, and simultaneously submitting a CIP request for the same amount of money?
I think the question you're at, of course you can cancel it, but the question is can it wait till July 1st?
Well,
And I don't know the answer to that.
And I think I've already said, I want to go for it if we can.
Right,
I'm asking is if it somehow it doesn't work, can we do the other?
Right. I think I understand your question. You're
Right.
saying if the regulatory agencies were giving us so much agita that we thought we weren't
I
going to
didn't
be
want to
able
put it so quite directly,
Yeah,
but
I will.
thank you. Thank you, Amy.
But I think, you know, and I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if we're going to know in time. I think it gets, you know, it's tricky either way. We know that there are people who certainly are hopeful, and I'm hopeful that they would approve us. We would be able to get their field back in order for them, so that at least they have it for the summertime. You know, we've certainly heard stakeholders in that neighborhood talk about how important that area is to them. So the sooner we could get in there, the better. You know, what Leslie's alluding to is not unreal, as we've all seen, that the Connecticut DEP can sometimes, you know, put a little wrinkle in our best laid plans. Honestly, I think that the plan itself, the plan is easily approvable, because a plan is a dig and ship plan. You know, we don't want to speak poorly of anyone at Connecticut DEP. You know, it just can be very dependent on who you're assigned and how responsive they are to you. I'm going to leave it at that. But, you know, we ought to be able to get a design ready. We ought to be able to get bids in, have it ready to go, be ready to move on it, and then we see what else they ask us.
Leslie, I mean, a comment, given the amount of attention the field has generated by lack of work, I don't see us trying to make this more complex than it has to be.
I don't think that necessarily makes it complex. We'll just see what happens in February, because I think this is all a regulatory issue. But I'm just one.
And I don't know if the dates will coincide, quite honestly, not without looking at the calendars. I don't know how, you know, when I look at the drop dead dates, we have to have the stuff into y'all versus when we might expect them, because they want a plan into them by February 16th. I don't know how long it'll take them to turn something back around to us. I can still get something out on the street while they're looking at it, if I'm willing to gamble on that, because I don't think, it's easy to do an addendum. And again, these things are pretty straightforward. Leslie and I are both familiar with, a lot of times where they get you is on the other end.
Right.
When they come in and they want to look at a soil profile or something, of what you're bringing into the site. And they can be kind of sticky about that sometimes.
And then my other question that I'd like to, I don't know whether it's to ask or whatever, but, certainly, we still don't have the A2 survey with at least the very basic elements that were outlined by Katie Blankley and Wayne Fox, John Wetmore, Jim Michael, et cetera, back in mid-June. And one of them is pure delineation of the separate parcels within this site. I mean, the survey that was given, the boundary survey, has actually 2 parcel numbers on 1 parcel as an example. But the field itself is 3 parcels, according to the other maps that we have down. I mean, there's total 4 parcels over there. But, so, the recommendation in that particular meeting, Jim Michael, certainly Wayne Fox was involved, was that we should make sure that we keep to each of the individual parcels. And I guess my concern here is that we make sure we know the meets and boundaries of the particular testing locations that have caused this, approvable plan to be required, and, see if there's a way to limit what we have to do to the actual meets and bounds of that particular parcel, which is something that would be similarly done in the private sector, but certainly something, it was Jim Michael who brought it up at that meeting, and Wayne, So I hope that somewhere along, as you move ahead here, that you'll be working with the surveyors to make sure we understand how those things begin to mesh.
Okay.
To save the taxpayers' money so that we don't have to do more than we would need to otherwise. And also the future risk.
Jeff?
I don't have much. The letter that you're referring to, that's not the same as the letter of October 16th that
No,
you
this
referred to?
this came in, we got it November 30th. So this was in response to Ron Matten's letter saying, we approve, thank you for your letter, Mr. Matten. We approve, all the information you've given us, keep the fences up, keep us informed, send us your plan, the remediation plan, and, tell us if anything changes. So we had our environmental counsel look at it as well, as I was like, what, they want approval now? And they're like, don't worry, it's a boilerplate letter, don't get all paranoid. So,
Yeah, the letter that you referred to that you say is attached actually wasn't attached.
oh, okay. Well,
But it doesn't seem to me that it matters, because that letter pretty much supersedes it.
This
Right.
comes after, so,
Right. Okay,
but we
well-
can certainly get you all
No,
of the
that's-
above.
We trust you.
have
that's
enough
all
to
right,
read?
yeah. Assuming these funds are appropriated by the BET at its next meeting, is the February 16th date a difficult date for you to meet with the
No,
request?
because we already have the funding for the design, so we
Right.
can get that cooking.
All right.
This is so that we'd be able to, once that design's done, and again, it's a pretty straightforward kind of package, get that out on the street, and then award the contract in this fiscal year.
I'm not remembering what was the amount of the earlier funding for some of these interim measures. Do you remember? The 165 is in addition to what? That we earlier appropriated? You're
I don't think you appropriate
That
anything
wasn't
for the
Board of Ed
field.
budget.
Isn't the Board of Ed budget?
It
Your
was
your
not.
application says the DPW is requesting an additional appropriation of 165, and that plus your remarks was
well, maybe
making
we
me
should
think that
just
we'd
say
appropriated
we were
some
requesting one.
Okay.
Sorry. We're so used to like using our standard form, sorry.
Okay, that's all right, yeah.
We'll
I-
we'll pay more attention to that
I
next time.
I hate it when words like additional just roll off
Right,
your
right,
tongue.
right,
Okay.
right. No, no,
Okay.
good,
All
good,
right.
good point.
All right, no, thank you,
Okay.
thank you,
Is that-
that's all I have.
Yeah.
Really?
No, how quickly can we get this to the RTM is my question.
January would
Okay.
be, it would be
Great.
January.
Thank you.
So.
Okay, I think we're good on
Any other
that.
questions?
Thank you.
Amy, thank you very much.
Okay, if you need anything else, let me know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is GEMS. $2,131,000, release of conditions, contribution to GEMS. Pete, I have a question for you. In our conditions sheet for the fiscal year, $4,386,000 was condition. However, in the information we got, it talked about 404,498,000. Is there a discrepancy on that, or?
This, the original condition was,
Well, in our condition sheet.
it was not twice this amount here?
It's not that, it's not the 4,498, it's 4,386, 4,386.
I could check on that condition.
Which, but then that,
You're not doing it equally, though.
Sounds like the prior year
could be.
budget. 4498 is the.
I could,
So maybe the figure got picked up from the prior year.
well, I'm looking at the 2006, fiscal year 2016 budget conditions. And number 2 is $4,386,000, subject to release by the BET, semi-annual report from GEMS. So I'm just trying to figure out what's the right number.
In the GEMS budget, it's 2230, so that would be 4,460,000 and change. I think this month might be a mathematical error. It's not half of the
In the
condition
condition
amount.
statement or in the submission?
I could check for you on that.
Because then if we're releasing the, I mean, there, obviously in the paperwork, it talks about how much was already released today.
Yeah, they have half already.
Yeah, so it's half, would be a little different. Anyway, we'll figure that out. So, Charlie, John, welcome.
As far as our approved fee, according to what went through the budget cycle last year, is $4,498,000. Paid, it comes in 2 payments. Paid to date was $2,367,000. It's not exactly 50%. We did have some front-loaded expenses that we know occur annually, so that was included in the first payment. So the balance due GEMS, according to our presentation, is the $2,131,000.
So,
I can give you a brief rundown of the financials, the way we usually do it, and then you can obviously ask questions, Charlie, and fill in on the operational side.
Yeah, maybe just why don't you take us through, would you want to start with the operational part of it, or
We'll
it's
start
up
with
to you
the
guys?
financials.
Okay, sure.
The section in the beginning is basically the operational statistics, or our calls, our statistics on that, response times, and so forth. What I'd like you to do is go toward the back, to the numbered pages, backing in from page 13 to page 1. We get to that. And that's our balance sheet for our period ended October 31st. This is our 6-month end. GEMS is on April 30th fiscal year. So if we look at our balance sheet, going down some of the more significant accounts, that would involve swings or something that we would be willing to explain or able to
John,
explain.
I'm sorry, just hold on a second. Do you guys all have the balance sheet that I was talking about?
Yep.
It's page 1, right?
Page 1, correct.
one.
Page 1 at the bottom, correct.
I mean,
I
Jeff's,
thought you mentioned something on page 13.
Thank you.
you got it? Okay, I'm sorry.
Sure. The current year, October 31st, the first major amount under receivables is other receivables. So included in the $2,235,000 that's shown there is the receivable for the second payment from the town of $2,131,000. So that's obviously the bulk of our other receivables. That would be the flow from the town. Going down our accounts, our fixed assets, equipment net of depreciation, we show $1,283,000 as opposed to $1,201,000 in our audit period at April 30th. Our fixed assets actually increased by almost $300,000 during the year. Net of depreciation, it shows an increase of approximately $80,000. Our liabilities and fund balance, accounts payable and accruals, down slightly or fairly significantly from our April 30th year end. Our deferred revenue, what we do is we book annually our commitment to the town under our contract. So $3,044,000 is our current deferred at the balance sheet date of October 31st. We book that in total when we receive our first payment, which is in July, and amortize that monthly. The next accounts down, our major accounts for fund balances are our major categories: unrestricted, temporarily restricted, and permanently restricted. We show an increase for unrestricted funds to $1,639,000 from $1,259,000, and we show a decrease in our temporarily restricted funds from $930,000 to $696,000. And those flows between our fund balances are explained on the second page, number 2. our statement of changes in net assets for the 6 months. Our unrestricted fund shows a positive change in net assets of $379,000, and that's partially offset by a decrease in our temporarily restricted fund, basically reflecting the capital purchases. So we show a negative change in net assets there of $233,000, netting out to a positive $146,000 for the 6 months. The next page shows a comparison of our unrestricted fund, our major operating fund. The left total is carried forward from page 2. It compares budget variance in our annual budget. Most of the variances are positive for the 6 months. We show some training income and standby income. Those are seasonal, so we show a very positive variance according to those numbers for the 6 months. Those should even out for the rest of the year. Our expenses are positive for the 6 months, positive variance of $287,000. Ordinarily, our expenses are weighted more heavily toward the second half of the year, so we are having a good year, but the positive variance there may be whittled down by the end of our fiscal year. The next page is a statement of functional expenses, which summarizes our major categories of expense, actual budget for the 6 months, total and actual for last year. Our total personnel-related expenses, $2,672,000, positive against the budget of $2,940,000. Our other expenses, non-personnel, are listed below. Generally, the percentage variances and the dollar variances for the 6 months we report out annually to our own board. There's nothing that's too unusual or out of the ordinary in terms of almost all of those accounts. So basically, we're trending very well. Total other expenses, $618,000 compared to $637,000 for the estimate for the budget. The next page is just a patient receivable analysis, which we do. It gives percentages that we analyze in case we see anything varying to a great degree. We jump in there and try to see anything in the receivables collections and our billing and our cash flow that's different. But as of the last period, we don't see any wild variances or changes in our percentages, so everything looks pretty good shape there. Next page just restates.
I'm sorry, John, just if I may, but the last, the August 15th, October 15th, sent to collection write-offs, 90,000?
Yes,
Is
that's
that
correct.
larger than
That is a
normal?
jump. Pretty much, we did see some slow up in our collections for the summer. Sometimes we have to wait to see if collections will pick up. Collections are usually pretty slow. And after we analyzed our aging, we felt it necessary to put a little more in collections than ordinary.
But you're trending fine for the year?
We wouldn't anticipate that continuing.
Good.
Next page is just restate our financial statements according to more of a town presentation. So if we look at the front page, we see general positive revenue variances totaling $26,000 for the 6 months and $287,000 for total expenses for positive against budget for $313,000 for the 6 months. Again, that's not the kind of variance we expect to see for the second half. Hopefully we hold a good amount of that. But our trend in terms of our activity, in terms of weather-related calls, in terms of our overtime usually tends a little less successful for the second half of the year. But overall, we seem to be in good shape for the first half, and we hope to generally continue that. The rest of the pages beyond that just show an explanation of our FTEs. There's no change really from budget at all. And so basically, that's the last page for the summary there.
So you mentioned FTEs. I'm sorry, is there a sheet showing what the FTEs?
Page 12.
That's on page 12. So our total against budget at October 31st, the differences are very minimal.
Okay. All right, question? Really?
John, the positive variance in salaries and health care, is that typical for the first 6 months of the year, or was there some
In healthcare,
turnover?
as far as that goes, we did the budget. We had not gone out and we changed our insurance companies. We got a very favorable rate, so that was not reflected in the budget.
Okay.
We went from United Healthcare to Aetna. United Healthcare was basically weeding out small to mid-sized companies such as ourselves, so we did get benefits there that we couldn't have anticipated at the time of the budget. As far as the salary rates, we do have some initiatives in there that will be kicking in the second half of the year. We had to increase our per diem rates. We have almost 1 in 5 of our FTEs are in the field staff or per diems. We hadn't increased those rates since 2007. We were getting severe blowback from the staff. So that's one increase that's going to impact the second half of the year. And also our new hire rates similarly had been increased since 2007. It was becoming very difficult to fill slots.
Thanks.
Questions?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Charlie?
I'll be brief. We had a fundraising thank you, if you will, to a certain amount of our funders, our donators, and also asked that some of the donators and some of our board bring prospective donors. We have a new chairman of the fundraising committee, and it's really energetic is the right word for it. So if you go to our website, you'll see a video of that event. And I think Caroline put it up on the town website too. And then we have 2 centennial videos that were terrific. They rode along with us for a day and then came back and did a second video on our high school program. So, and our fundraising has gone out and it's coming in. We were very surprised by a donation from a foundation that has been not a regular donor, and we received $25,000. So I've researched it, trying to find somebody on the board, somebody in the trustees, somebody that we might have transported, and I can't directly relate it. So we will thank them and hopefully stay on their radar screen. I think the final thing, and it's just kind of a sideline interest, there's a new medical director for the school nurses, and that medical director has approved Narcan oxygen and EpiPens. So we did go in and train the school nurses to use those type of procedures and medications. So it's just, I bring it up only because we have such a tight relationship with the Board of Ed, and it just works really well for us and the students.
Related to that, volunteers among high school age kids.
Yeah.
Is that getting stronger or not so
Booming,
strong?
absolutely booming. When we, a year ago, I think we had 6 kids. And by the middle of the year, we had 35, and I think they're pushing 40 at this point. They were on the avenue handing out hot chocolate, trying to gain emails so that we can do a quarterly newsletter. And we had, from the event, we had those little squishy stress reliever ambulances. And so we handed what we had left of those out too. So hopefully, I haven't seen the list, but hopefully.
Is that just a rise in interest among the high school kids, wanting to?
I think
learn
it's a
about it?
rise in the interest, and I think that the advisors have become reinvigorated. And it just, goes hand in hand. So.
I always hear comments about Gary Ann as a phenomenal volunteer base among high school kids, college-age kids. That's great to hear.
But that they do, but they don't have a paramedic system.
Okay, well,
So
They need all the
They need
volunteers they
them.
can get.
okay.
no, their paramedics come from Stanford on call. So
Okay.
So they have an EMT system, is that what they have? And on more serious calls, they
They'll
do
call
a
in.
mutual aid from Stanford?
yeah,
And the response times on that are horrendous.
I have read articles that have cited that it certainly isn't what you get here.
Right.
So, I love having the explorers, and what's really amazing is the president of our first explorer post is now working for us. And she came back as an EMT, got her medic, and so she's going to move on to that. And that's not unusual. We see a lot of these kids go off to school and come back and either work for us or teach for us.
Well, and certainly those who were thinking of pre-med or are pre-med, need to kind of get almost that certification, right? I mean, it's very helpful.
Well, it's helpful.
Yeah.
It's helpful, and I think just, I think that it's good for their resume, for their college resume,
Yeah,
too.
Yeah, I just had that discussion with my daughter, just thinking of, so I may push her toward you, if that's okay.
Well, do it, and as you well know, we train them, and then they'll go out on standbys with us until we think they're ready to go on the ambulance, and then, they're strictly supervised, and the rules are around their grades and around their time. But, yeah, I think they get a really good experience, and we love having them, so.
You didn't get Mark's meaning, he wants some help on the tuition, well, that's good.
That's right. All right, any other comments?
No, it's great.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good results.
Thank you.
So the next item on the agenda is Board of Ed, release of conditions of $655,000 for MISA contingency funds. Joe, welcome.
Thank you.
Would you like one of those little squishy stress relievers?
No, the stress is almost over with
Yeah,
us.
yeah.
So that's
Well,
good.
actually, don't say that yet.
Yeah.
We're here to request the release of the remaining $655,000 of contingency funds. This is not additional funds. This is just a release of the funds that you've already committed to. It was part of the May 2014 budget authorization, and the condition reads as follows: $655,000 for instructional space upon receipt of the auditorium TCO and the report on the use of contingency. So we had submitted a report. We've given you some dates about the auditorium TCO. The auditorium TCO ended up in three pieces because of how certain things were completed. The first TCO was for the use of the auditorium in auditorium stage and support areas, green room, et cetera, on September 22nd. Then the second one, or the second part, was the use of the auditorium seating area on October 1. And then the last piece was the pit lift, the pit area, had to do with the operation safety features of the pit itself, and that we received on December 2nd. So we have all of the operational permissions to operate and use the entire auditorium. The second part is the contingency analysis, and I think it's easy to just look at the front page. We have a total, once we receive the $655,000 release, we will have a total remaining contingency of $2,084,000. And we've identified uses of that contingency both for the auditorium, things that were not resolved as far as change orders, extras, and whatever, but also there's a couple $100,000 in there for the next phase that we already know about, and that has to do with some more asbestos removal and a few other things that we're meeting there. So therefore, we have $934,000 rough justice of unused contingency at this point, or unknown uses of contingency at this point. And then on the second page, you could see that what we have left to build is about $6 million worth of hard cost and soft costs. That's remaining contract costs. For the contractors we have, it subtracts the retention. So when you take this, the $933,000, $934,000, and divide it by the $6 million worth of cost, we come out with a remaining contingency of 15%. So we think we're in good shape, and we think we've met the requirements and the intent of the release of the funds, and we ask that you do that.
Okay. Questions?
No, it's a lot of hard work to get here, in terms of what's there. It's not been an easy project, but it's a beautiful project.
It's been a successful
It's a beautiful project.
It's been great.
Any risks that you can anticipate for that contingency at this point? You're inside, really, working, so weather should not be...
Well, actually, on the second phase, we're not inside yet.
Oh,
We
you're
have to
not?
demolish the existing auditorium.
Okay.
And then, so therefore, we have, once the demolition is outside, but then we have the excavation, we have, which could be some risk, the foundations, which are concrete, so that's weather dependent. The structural steel is already fabricated and made up in the steel guy's shop, so that'll come in with the cranes and be erected. And then you'll have the enclosure, and most of that wall, the enclosure wall, is being fabricated now. So once you get enclosed, let's say by the end of the spring of next year is our anticipation, then it's all inside work. And the finishes and the technical space is much less than the auditorium. These are practice rooms. I mean, we paid attention to the acoustics again. but the materials and the construction details are fairly simple as compared to the auditorium. And we're going to change the name from MISA to just MISS, because now the auditorium's done. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
That was not taken by vote to the committee. Change your name.
Yeah.
Maybe that's coming up at our next
Yes.
meeting.
Okay, why don't
Full
we,
disclosure.
why don't we review what we have? Just, first of all, probably a dumb question, but the release of conditions, is that something that we have to forward to BET?
Yes,
Right?
yes. We have
Pete?
to,
Non-routine.
we have to recommend
The
the
release of conditions,
Release of
is it
conditions.
released by the BET or by the Budget
Just the
Committee?
Budget
BET.
Oh, it's a BET.
By the
Full
BET, isn't
BET. Full BET, I think. Full BET.
I'll look at the language from the last one.
All right.
Yeah.
So anyway, just looking at these 4 items, routine versus non-routine, what do you all think? I think they're all kind of,
Releases tend to be non-routine. Are interims non-routine?
Should we start with the first selectman, just,
well, no, so in general, I would think, yeah, the first selectman and the DPW would be non-routine, right?
right?
I mean, the question that you asked, interims, usually it's based on the size of the interim, whether you do R or NR. 165 it's not that large.
I think that because it's field remediation, those issues that Amy has raised, and the transfer, we'll call it that, of this item from the BOE, I think this should be a non-routine item, even though $165,000. Is that what you're saying?
I'm
It's a
inclined to agree.
It's a capital item for 165 as an interim, but it's also a transfer. It was being handled by the BOE. I think it should be non-routine.
Do you agree?
I'm inclined to agree. And so what's going to happen here is the only item that's really eligible to be routine is the first item. It's funny to have one item of routine, you might as well call them all non-routine. I mean, it's only a question of how it's presented,
Well,
but usually what
it's just-
happens.
it's a lot easier if we don't have to give a report.
Well, Mark, or Mary Lee, what's your opinion on the DPW?
I'd agree, I would say that'd be non-routine.
That's fine, but, the releases to me are non-routine. I think we should be able to explain that a little more robustly to the
Yeah,
public when
yeah.
when we give that report.
I'm okay with all that. So what do you want to do with SE1?
Um,
Is it worthwhile? I mean, it almost doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter, I mean, I'm happy
Yeah.
to give a short report on it. and
Yeah, so why don't we just call them all
call them all
non-routine?
okay.
So I move SE1 First Selectman for $26,430, an additional appropriation as a non-routine item.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, 4-0.
I move PW2 DPW for $165,000 for an appropriation for the William Street field as non-routine.
And I'd second that as well.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Can I just say, Pete, we make sure that on the BETs that this additional comes off when it's described, just appropriation.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
On the second
On the
item,
descriptive-
PW2.
On PW2,
Sorry.
DPW, PW2, that you just make sure in the descriptive for the purpose that the word additional is deleted.
Just appropriation for William
Just
Street.
so it becomes
field
appropriation
remediation.
for
Did you
William
follow that,
Street.
Pete?
Yep.
Okay. Leslie,
I
James?
move GEM 1 for GEMS for two, is this the first time? No.
We're going
it
to
should
check
be-
on that
We're
number.
gonna
It
check
should
on the
be
number.
GM 2.
We'll check.
Can
we'll
you check on
the
that,
number.
Pete?
You
Okay,
need to
I'm sorry.
check on how, what the number is too, Pete. And I'll say for now, 2,131,000, which is, Pete's going to check on the number, our release of conditions as a non-routine item.
I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I move ED4 for the BOE for an amount of $655,000 for the release of conditions on MISA contingency as non-routine.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, 4-0-0. We have no old business. We have no new business. I understand the economic conditions report isn't ready.
We have no Roland, because he's in.
We have no Roland, more importantly.
Yeah,
So next item is approval of the November 9th.
Which I would
BAT
move.
Budget Committee meeting minutes.
I'll move that.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
So I move that
Okay.
we adjourn. Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I move we adjourn.
Great.
6:02.
Next meeting is January 12th, and it could be a totally different set of people up there at this table.
Could be.
Could be.
Well, we should take a moment to thank our chairman for
Oh,
his
yes,
time
right.
serving as
Yeah.
head of the budget committee. So
Absolutely, yeah.
And I agree
Yeah,
with that.
thank you.
Give him
Job
a big
well
hand.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
We thoughtfully
Thank
never
you,
gave
Mark.
him a gavel, but.
He didn't need one.
I'd rather yell.